The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience. Today, continuing our coverage of fantasy football 2020. If you've missed anything already, hit the description of this podcast or video, and you can find all of the other shows, like our player-by-player profile of players at each position. Some you might want to check out, or the top 200 rankings, or the running back rankings. Today, the wide receiver rankings for the season. Like I mentioned, if you want to hit the ranks, the list themselves, that top 200 list is in the description of this video or podcast. Very easy to find, updated periodically whenever news happens. Breaking this down with me today from theathletic.com, host of the Flex League, it's Jake Ciely. What's up?
What's going on? Yeah, actually, I wore this. I know you can't see it until after the fact, but I wore the shirt for you. It says, "I'm not arguing. I'm explaining why I'm right."
Oh.
So if there's anything more me than this shirt, that's pretty much the truth.
Yeah, I guess so. We're going to find that out in the rankings today, because I just basically did mine to troll you. I do have one big sentiment off the top about rankings this year, about draft strategy this year. We've already seen a bunch of players opt out on the season. We don't know if the season's going to go off without a hitch. It's probably not. Hopefully they have contingency plans. I'm expecting football to happen in week 1. After that, we'll see what happens. But I think that this year is the year that you want to go as crazy as possible with your draft. Don't try to draft for consistency or anything like that, because there's a lot of unknowns in football as it is anyway, as it pertains to, is this team going to be good versus this defense? And we don't know year to year. What is injury? Is injury luck going to happen? Is this guy injury prone? We don't really know how to quantify that. But now, when you throw like the potential COVID implications into this, just take who you want, is basically the way that I'm going for it. Shoot for as much upside as possible and hope that it just works out. That's not actually a bad mantra anyway for any redraft fantasy football league, but this year in particular, I think it's going to be more prescient to figure it out that way. Also, if you're out there watching, share the show around, tell some friends. That would be highly, highly valuable to Pat Mayo. Also, for the audio podcast, rate it 5 stars. Just scroll down, hit the 5-star button. And for the video, smash a like. And in the comment section, tell me your favorite wide receiver sleeper this year in 2020 drafts. Jake, the rankings, they're not as crazy as you might think, as you've been led to believe. Number 1 in the rankings for wide receivers in 2020 is Michael Thomas. Number 2 is going to be Devontae Adams. Then I have Julio Jones, Tyreek Hill, Kenny Golladay, Chris Godwin, Robert Woods, DeAndre Hopkins, Allen Robinson, and Adam Thielen. That's my top 10, and I'm sticking to it unless you want to convince me otherwise.
No, but can I backtrack real quick about this strategy for the year? Because I do want to chime in on that.
Go
don't
nuts.
Mind.
Yeah, go nuts.
No, I completely agree with you about you definitely going for your guys this year. Who knows what's going to happen? I will say this. You saw the flex email. I'm not doing it yet for the flex leagues. I said, just keep this in the back of your mind to have a vote for it. Get your thoughts just while let's talk about here is I was suggesting that, first of all, we're going to 18 roster spots instead of 16. We already don't have a kicker. So that's actually even another skill position player. Max IR spots, obviously COVID related if you want to distinguish between the two. But the one thing I said that we might want to talk about down the road, like when we get to the end of August, if it's looking like a lot of people are going to be opting out, if it's looking more like baseball than the NBA, where we might have cases any given week, is to play still with waivers, still with trades, still with all that type of roster management, but weekly a best ball lineup where, because I know that sounds like, oh, you're taking part of the strategy out of it. But the problem I'm talking about here is, like, even if you have a backup quarterback, if your backup quarterback plays Sunday in a terrible matchup and you have Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott both on your team going on Monday Night Football, and that's just, it feels really unfortunate if we found out Monday that they came down with a COVID situation with the Cowboys or whoever they're facing, and all of a sudden you lose to those 2 guys on Monday where you weren't going to play them and you were going to wait for them. So it's just a side thought of like what your thoughts are on that, because I think that might be an interesting spin just for this year.
I don't disagree with the sentiment of it. I also think it's very cowardly. So I'm against it. I think that, like, if you want to keep your guys till Monday night and the game gets canceled, well, you're fucked. That's fantasy football for you.
I think it's a little bit different, but hey, so I know which way you're going with the vote. But in any case, so yeah, just throwing that out there as a sidebar. But for your top 10, the only one is DeAndre Hopkins. I had a lot of people already asking me. They're like, "Why are you such like a mark for DeAndre Hopkins?" Like all those. I'm at 5, and it's mostly because I love Kyler Murray's deep ball. I actually do have an article coming out on The Athletic Wednesday, depending on when you view this video. Talking about end zone targets and how that Kyler Murray was actually bottom of the league, down by Phillip Rivers and Tom Brady in his end zone target efficiency. So that's a little bit concerning, but at the same time, I'm not moving him down that much. I'm not dropping him outside of the top 5. I mean, if you want to debate whether it's him or Allen Robinson, I'm actually really high on Allen Robinson. I'm just not going to take all those guys in front of DeAndre Hopkins. I think we kind of had this conversation before, though.
Yeah, I mean, we tend to double up on content all the time. If you go through the player-by-player wide receiver profiles, we really broke down DeAndre Hopkins. And where I'm coming from on it is I'm willing to miss out on the number 1 receiver in fantasy because that is the upside of DeAndre Hopkins. I'm not going to pretend like it's not. He is amazing. In this new situation, however, the way that I look at it is if I'm looking at overall target percentage from last year and even the past few years, but last year in particular, 30.5% market share of targets in Houston for DeAndre Hopkins. There's just not a chance that he replicates that in Arizona. Then his efficiency needs to go up, which could very well be the case, but it feels like Cliff Kingsbury wants to run like the Karl Marx offense, a little bit for everyone. You know, you can't have too much over here. You need to have a little bit over here. That I just think the week-to-week production where he's going to have spike games, that when you look at and I know I just railed against consistency a little bit, but someone like Devontae Adams is like, I think that he's closer to like the guys that I have him ranked around, like the Gallaudays, the Godwins, where there's going to be a few down weeks in there just because that's not the way that their offense is going to play. And I do try to correlate my rankings a little bit. I'm very high on Kenyon Drake, which means I think that he's going to get the ball a lot in the red zone, just a lot in general. They're going to try to run. And I've kind of pointed it out before, like you can take a gamble on Christian Kirk later, depending on where he's going. I don't think that he's an equivalent to DeAndre Hopkins by any means, but he's going to see likely not the primary coverage at this point. And if we're talking about deep balls, maybe he's the one who can skirt behind the offense. I'd just be better off with the unknown surrounding Hopkins, gambling on just another upside type player on Arizona later on, rather than putting all my eggs into the basket of DeAndre Hopkins when, I know Kyler Murray is on the rise in terms of ADP, but I think I'd just rather take him almost like Drew Brees back in the day, like before he had Michael Thomas, where it's like, oh yeah, you could draft Colston, or you could just draft Brees because you know he's going to throw a touchdown pass to like 9 different people or 14 different people as the season goes along. That's how the Arizona offense strikes me. So if I say 30.5% for Hopkins, which was second in the league in terms of overall team target share a year ago, I could see that being more around like 25% this year. And that's a significant difference when we're talking about overall targets. That takes him all the way from, let's say 150 targets down to like 120 targets, which isn't great.
No, see, I have him a little bit higher. I have him in like the 130 range. I have him 96 receptions on those, but also he could improve on his yards per reception. But all that being said is, look, anybody outside of Thomas and Adams, and I would even say like Julio. And Tyreek are almost kind of in their tier by themselves. But this next group that you're talking about, like with the Hopkins and the Allen Robinson and the Kenny Gallaudays and stuff like that, like kind of feel like this is kind of what your first point was, is if you have your guy in this range, just take your guy here, because that's just, if you don't, you're going to miss on him anyway. You're going to have to take one of them depending on what they go to. I've been in probably 10 different drafts already where it's been Godwin before him. I've seen Kenny Galladay. I wouldn't do Kenny Galladay mostly because similar to the fact that like the target share volume is like, it's very similar with Marvin Jones and the involvement there, but Stafford has to be as good as he was last year. Like his efficiency was kind of that Matt Ryan 2016 efficiency. I'm not saying he can't do it again, but Galladay's not going to be 90 plus receptions. He's kind of more in that 70 to 80 range. So again, look, we're just nitpicking here. Your guy versus my guy versus somebody might say Mike Evans is going to be the better beneficiary of Tom Brady than Chris Godwin might be. Like, people have their guys in this range. So I want to get too hung up on it. I'm just not downgrading Hopkins as much as some people.
So last year, Kenny Galladay with a 21% market share in terms of targets. That was much higher.
And I don't really see that going up much.
It was higher when Stafford was playing. It was around like 26%. And that was even with Marvin Jones. So if it's a bank on Stafford being healthy in this regard as well. I just like Galladay a lot. I actually think that Marvin Jones is the better value this year. So when you look at my rankings, it's funny that you didn't push back that hard on Robert Woods, who I have at number 7. And on the screen, if you're watching the video, you can see the average ADP next to it. And when we get to my 11 to 20, you're going to see I have 2 guys that are being drafted in the 40s and 50s, very high up in the teens for me. So it just kind of shows my strategy is going to be find that running back or 2 at the top. It could be the double tight end, which we argued on the last show, or just even 1 tight end or a quarterback, whatever it might be. And then figure out my wide receivers after that. I just think there are so many good receivers going after round 3, Robert Woods being one of them, that you can just really fill out your roster pretty easily that way and still have significant upside. There's a lot of downside that comes with it. So like me arguing something like Robert Woods versus DeAndre Hopkins, I'm going to concede that DeAndre Hopkins' upside is probably far higher, but I'm looking at someone like Robert Woods, who I like his situation really a lot now, just with that defense being not what it was. I think that they're going to have to throw more just through attrition of being behind in games. We're seeing someone who never comes off the field, someone with a 22% market share anyway, and then get rid of Brandon Cooks, and that can go up. I know they brought in other guys. They might play 2 tight end sets, but I just think that where he doesn't come off the field here, plus his natural uptick in terms of touchdown rate, which should align back more with his career average than what we saw in 2019. I just do think that if you're getting like an early 4th round pick on Robert Woods, that's a top 10 guy to me. And that's someone I'm going to take every single time.
Yeah, and I have Robert Woods at 13, and I do have him in front of Cooper Kupp. Mostly something that else we overlapped that we talked about is down the end of the season. Even when you talk about Everett being hurt. Now, Everett is out, so there's still no Everett, no Cooks at this point. And Cooper Kupp was coming off the field for Josh Reynolds, and he wasn't at that 90% snap share that he was, or snap percentage that he was earlier in the season. It was down 60% one game, 70% another game, 80 down to 60 again. And to go to the point about Robert Woods is, I don't hate it. I just don't love it, mostly because he's allergic to the end zone. I just only bring that up again because I'm writing that article about end zone targets and all that type of stuff. Down at the end of that season, Josh Reynolds actually was getting more end zone looks than Robert Woods was. Whatever it might be about Jared Goff or just Robert Woods for his entire career disappears when it comes to the end. He actually has to score from, it's kind of like the Tyreek Hill, but like he doesn't score from 40 yards out. He scores from like 20 yards out. He just also falls down at the 1 and the 5 and the 2, like it's just a lot. And I'm not saying that's just a happenstance luck situation, just whatever it is. It's now been his entire career. Robert Woods is just very touchdown non-productive. Like he doesn't produce. So that's why I wouldn't put him in the top 10. I don't hate it. I would definitely go a couple guys. I don't think you even mentioned Juju Smith-Schuster.
Nope. With
Ben back. I love Juju Smith-Schuster with Big Ben back up. By the way, 0 for 6 in end zone targets last year. You don't think that's going to improve and probably see more targets with Big Ben? So I don't hate the Woods thing. It's just I wouldn't put him quite that high, mostly because of the touchdowns.
And then you have Adam Thielen at number 10.
That's where I have him. Love Adam Thielen. I have so much Adam Thielen this year.
See, I'm with you. I just don't see who else is really getting targets here. Jefferson's already on the COVID list.
Yeah, he might have 160 targets this year because it's not just the fact that he's going to see so much every single week. They got rid of Stefanski, and now I'm not saying the offense is going to just swing 180 the other way, but just 2 years ago, Kirk Cousins threw a lot more than he did last year. So if people forget, Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, both well over 100 targets 2 years ago, both inside the top 15, if I remember correctly. I know they were definitely both inside the top 20 that year. So if you look at it, the increase, Kirk Cousins should pass a little bit more this year. And then the fact that Adam Thielen and nobody else besides Big Irv, there you go, your guy at tight end. I mean, I don't see how he's not top 10, but if anything, the fact that I own almost 100% of him, you might want to stay away because my luck.
No, you're all good on that. Let's go 11 to 20. I have my guy Scorin McLaurin at number 11. I'm just going to get him in every single
Wow.
round. Then I have DJ Chark at number 12. Evans, DJ Moore, Odell, Juju, AJ Brown, T.Y. Hilton, DK Metcalf, and Amari Cooper. Like, I would be fine in my drafts if I went running back heavy at the beginning, going McLaurin, Chark, some combination of the three of Woods, McLaurin, Chark, and DK Metcalf, all in like the next few rounds, just building my core that way. I just think that is an all upside type of team here. And one of them is probably going to bust. I have no doubts about that. Maybe all of them bust, but I can route a path to these guys being target monsters, being touchdown monsters. And I just don't see, like, Metcalf has Lockett there to take away from him. I understand that. But in terms of a touchdown presence, it does seem like they want to pepper DK Metcalf once they get in close. With Chark and McLaurin, like, I can read a path where they are the number one fantasy receiver. Now, that's a less than 1% chance of happening. But in terms of overall volume, in terms of teams being down and having to pass the entire game, like, I just see a route to them being highly successful through volume.
So do you want me to throw a little bit of water on the DK Metcalf thing?
Sure, let's hear it.
13 end zone targets for Tyler Lockett, less than 4 for DK Metcalf. When it's the end zone, it's actually Tyler Lockett, as it always has been. So I only bring that up. Like, I don't dislike DK Metcalf. I just think he has to overtake Tyler Lockett for him to be worth this. And again, now I do want to bring up one side point to, like, again, to your point about bringing up your guy. I'm looking at basically everybody from that you mentioned when you started at 13. I'll say 13. So 13 is 196 fantasy points down to, if we get to wide receiver 24, which you haven't even mentioned yet, is 185. 11 points. A touchdown and a little bit of a yardage type of game can swing all these guys. So again, I don't want to sound like I'm straddling the fence, but I'm not going to argue too much with any of these guys. Like, I have Devontae Parker at 14. I have Odell Beckham at 15. I have Terry McLaurin, who I love, but I have him down at 22 when it comes down to projections. And I have DK Metcalf at 27. It's such a small gap that you being right about 2 extra touchdowns or maybe 10 extra targets is going to make the difference in this entire group. So I want to go back to your point that you made earlier and just say, go with your running back early. You don't have to go 2 running backs, but definitely get one. You could go running back Kelsey if you want, as you love your tight end, and still get 2 or 3 of these guys, because I've seen Parker, I've seen Keenan Allen, I've seen a lot of Odell Beckham. Some drafts he goes in the 3rd round, some drafts he goes in the late 4th. You can get 2 or 3 of these guys and still be in the fact of what you said. They could all, anybody in this group, you could get 3 wide receiver 1s depending on what breaks this year.
Oh, absolutely. And, it takes one injury. It takes one person sitting out. Now, this could work against my guys as well. It's almost the same case as Adam Thielen. Just direct me towards who's going to end up with the most targets from this range, and that's where I want to be with all of this. And that's why I think that McLaurin and Chark really stick out above the rest when it comes down to it, because I think that they are the clear number ones on their team. I guess you could argue that Dede could eat into what Chark is doing, but we just didn't see that with Minshew last year. Like, he was a Chark guy.
Actually, it was Chris Connolly. It was a little bit better rapport than it was with Dede Westbrook with Minshew. So I agree with you there. I like Chark more than McLaurin, just because I'm like one of the biggest Dwayne Haskins fans. I'm just still a little bit concerned that not so much that he's not developing, because you saw him develop late last season over his last 4 games. And Terry McLaurin, I think I brought this up to you when we're doing the show with Meanie, is that if you take the first 4 games with Case Keenum, and then when Keenum started to fall off in his play and Dwayne Haskins took over, when Dwayne Haskins started to improve in those last 4 games. And again, this sounds like I'm nitpicking, or not nitpicking, but I'm picking for my point here. But if you take those first 4 and those last 4, Terry McLaurin was on pace for like ungodly numbers, like 1,700 yards and double-digit touchdowns. So there's certainly a realm where he finishes as a wide receiver 1 even. I'm just concerned that this is an offense that tries to run despite having a defense that is questionable on the backside. That front 7 is strong enough that they're not going to be like, we're not talking about the Cincinnati Bengals defense here. We're talking about a front 7 defense that could keep them in a lot of games. So I don't know if they're going to be relying on Haskins to throw 300 yards a game.
Fair enough, but I don't need Haskins to throw 300 yards a game just because I don't see very many other options. It's when they're going to pass, they're probably going to be trying to force it to McLaurin.
Steve Sims, great value at the end of the draft.
Listen, I don't hate Steve Sims, but like,
I love him.
Who the fuck is Steve Sims? Come on now.
At the end of your draft, Steve Sims and Antonio Gandy Golden, who basically is going to kind of be like a hybrid tight end for them this year. Yeah.
Yeah, like Steve Sims, they're going to use on like bubble screens and reverses because he has ultimate speed.
And don't forget,
he has 100 speed in Madden.
Oh, don't forget that they drafted, remember, poor man's Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, it's true. So, anyway, I love McLaurin here. DJ Moore is one that sticks out to me as well. I could have went higher than 14 on him. I really like DJ Moore a lot. I really like
17.
I really like him with Bridgewater specifically. Just I think that he's a very crisp route runner. He can do a lot after the catch, and if Bridgewater can throw these intermediate passes, then
That's all he can do.
DJ Moore should really eat here.
See, he should. And so I've said this before. This is just going to come down to how aggressive the offense is. If Teddy Bridgewater throws 600 times this year, which is possible, you're talking about a poor defense, and you're talking about Joe Brady coming in and Matt Rule, and depending on if Matt Rule just lets Joe Brady try to do what he did with LSU, we could see Bridgewater throw 600 times. My concern is Bridgewater throwing 550 times. Now it's 50 attempts over their full season. You can see why there's a big variance here. But on a yards per attempt with the Saints, and a yards per attempt for his entire career is pretty damn poor. And that's, granted, plays into DJ Moore's game, but DJ Moore's going to have to do a lot after the catch. And then you're talking about the fact that I don't think he throws for a lot of touchdowns. So I don't mind. Like, I love DJ Moore as a talent, but people think that if I'm putting out 17, I hate the guy. I just hate the situation, unless we do see Teddy Bridgewater in this offense just go ballistic, because you have to remember, the number one, quote unquote, for this offense is still Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, and that was my one hesitation, because when I initially did these, I think I had him like at 8 or 9, just because I know the volume is going to be there for him. But I also know at the same time, the guy that's going to lead this team in receptions is probably going to be Christian McCaffrey. The guy that's going to lead the team in touchdowns is probably Christian McCaffrey. So if you can't even be the number one on your own team, and you're the best receiver and the running back is taking away from you, it's a bit tough for me in certain circumstances. A very solid wide receiver too, though. T.Y. Hilton at 18. I don't know where the market stands on T.Y. Hilton. I try
hate him.
I try not to look at anyone else's rankings, to tell you the truth, because I don't really give a shit what anyone else thinks. So T.Y. Hilton at 18, I just think he's going to be a volume monster again, and I could be dead wrong on that. He's one I feel the least good about versus like Chark and McLaurin. He's a little bit older, but with Rivers coming in, I just don't know who the second is going to be. You can say it's Pittman. You can say that it's my guy, Paris Campbell. It could be Zach Pascal. They could run the entire French offense out there, but I know that Hilton is going to be the one who's the number one, at least to start the season.
So I will say two things about this, about the Phillip Rivers. So remember when I brought up Kyler Murray?
No.
Anyway, the 4 worst quarterbacks in end zone touchdown percentage: Mason Rudolph, Andy Dalton, Joe Flacco, and Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers was one of the worst last year, down there with those guys. He actually tied Joe Flacco. That's how bad. For everybody talking about how bad he played last year, that's how bad he played, especially when it came into the end zone. Here's the good news. T.Y. Hilton doesn't rely on end zone targets. That's not usually where he's scoring his touchdowns. I'm with you on T.Y. Hilton, because you're talking about a rookie in Pittman that you just brought up. You're talking about Campbell, who essentially kind of is a rookie after missing his entire rookie season. And I do like him out of the slot. You and I have talked about him at length. Zach Pascal, coming from ODU, I love him as, like, that's where my heart is, but as a talent, he's limited. So if you're looking at somebody, T.Y. Hilton over a 16-game season, it might be roller coastery similar to Amari Cooper, but it was just 2 years ago where we didn't have a problem with that, because he finished top 10. We took the 3 or 4 bad games. Just everybody who wants to make the argument for Cooper, I don't understand why they're not making the same argument for Hilton. I guess the age and the injuries are starting to concern people.
I would actually say that Hilton's in a better circumstance than Cooper is right now. I get that
that's where I was going.
The offense is better in Dallas. It's more efficient, but he also has 2 major other pieces to take away from him just in the passing game, plus Zeke, plus Dak running in touchdowns.
100%. And that was where I was going for my next point, is that the target share should be much more beneficial for Hilton, than it should be for Cooper, who has those concerns. So yeah, I'm with Hilton, and you can get Hilton as a wide receiver 3 this year. Yeah, almost every single draft he's going as a wide receiver 3.
Like, just looking back at last year, Amari Cooper only accounted for 19% of the targets on the Cowboys. I could see that going down, not substantially, but if it's like 16%, that's why I haven't been number 20.
And 1 week it's 30, and 1 week it's 5.
That's
all over the place.
Exactly. So maybe you could just go back to, I always like to tell Davis that his biggest crutch is like, whoa, he's going to be great in best ball. It's like, well, that's fantastic. This is not.
I hate the best ball.
This is not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about your draft. I feel
everybody's great in best ball.
Yeah, if they have a good week, best player ever. So my 21 to 30 range, I got Cooper Kupp, Stefan Diggs, Calvin Ridley, Keenan Allen, Tyler Lockett, Marvin Jones, A.J. Green, Cortland Sutton, Devontae Parker, and Tyler Boyd. I initially, obviously, had Cortland Sutton much higher, but I like Jerry Jeudy. I'm not going to lie to you.
Judge Judy? Or wait, do you call him Doug Judy or Judge Judy? I forget.
I call him Doug Judy.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'll definitely remember that. The Brooklyn Nine-Nine is a good call on that one. Yeah, I have Sutton at 23. Not that much difference. The only differences that we really have here is the fact that I mentioned it before. I have Devontae Parker up by 14. I think people are kind of the rose-colored glasses with the Preston Williams. And I like Preston Williams. You know I like Preston Williams. We talked about him last year. But Preston Williams, like, he wasn't that amazing. He's not going to kill Devontae Parker. And Devontae Parker, even if Preston Williams is out there for 16 games, still, he finally broke out, and Fitzpatrick should be under center for probably all the way up until weeks 14 or 15 around there. I don't understand why, similar to some of these other ones we're talking about, like why people don't want to be on board with Devontae Parker, but I'll take him as a wide receiver 2 or 3 in all of my leagues. I'll continue to take him in the 5th round as people let him fall there. That's the bigger difference. And then I'm trying to see what was the one other bigger difference that we had. There was one that you mentioned in there. That was...
I just wanted to hit on Cortland Sutton for a second. It's not that I think that Doug Judy comes in and just takes everything away from him. It's a combination of that offense getting a little bit better, and even bringing in someone like Melvin Gordon, who I don't like, but I know that they're going to give him the ball a lot just because they brought him in. So we're dealing with a situation last year where 43% of Cortland Sutton, he had the number one out of like good receivers, he had the number 1 air yards percentage of anyone. It was 43%. And then we're looking at his target share, and it was 26%. It's hard for me to believe that those numbers hit that top end again. Like, even if he drops back 10, 15% in both those, then he's just not that good.
Oh, and that's why my concern about Noah Fant too with the same team. It's just a lot of options just out of the backfield as well. Like, everybody's writing off Philip Lindsay that we talked about, and there's just a lot of options on this team for him to see that kind of 25% plus. Like, for the Allen Robinson, why we have him inside the top 10. I mean, he's just going to see that, even if Anthony Miller breaks out like I think he's going to. The one other one was Keenan Allen. And I understand people are hesitant about Tyrod Taylor, but Tyrod Taylor and Sammy Watkins were fine for 2 years. And I'm not saying that Mike Williams isn't a factor here, and Hunter Henry's not a factor, and Austin Eckler's not a factor, but Austin Eckler's not as big of a factor as people might think, because Tyrod Taylor is not Phillip Rivers when it comes to throwing to the running back. And I'm not saying jump off Austin Eckler. I'm just saying I'm not as concerned as most people with Keenan Allen. I think he fits very well for Tyrod's style. Now, obviously, we haven't seen a lot of them playing together. Tyrod might just fall in love with Mike Williams, but I still have Keenan Allen for 90 receptions, 1,100 yards, and 6 touchdowns. That's not even amazing by Keenan Allen standards, but that would still put him inside almost the top 15.
Yeah, I can see the route to that. The one pushback I would give against Keenan Allen, I mean, I have him ranked at number 24. I think he's a wide receiver 2. I think that he's going to be good and definitely the best on the Chargers. But I look at the 149 targets last year. That translated into 104 receptions overall.
Yeah, from 13 fewer receptions.
I know, I get that. But what do you have his target projected at this year?
For his targets, it's I don't put him on my projections because there's not enough room, but he loses about almost close to 20 targets this year.
See, I would probably put up more than that. I just think they're going to be a very run-heavy team.
I don't as much, mostly because Melvin Gordon is gone. I like Joshua Kelly, but I just don't think Austin Eckler's not running the ball 250 times. He's
no,
not even running,
but you have to consider that you're going to have like a sprinkling of Kelly, a sprinkling of Jackson. Eckler's going to get his carries on the ground. Tyrod's going to run a little bit as well. I just think this is going to be a slower pace team, and I think that defense, now healthy, is going to lead them into I don't think Anthony Lynn is a great coach. So if it's a close game or it's a one-score game, either way, I can just see them running the ball a ton. Like, that just seems to be his game plan.
Okay, so what would you put his targets at?
I would probably drop him to like 120 at max, so like deduct 30.
So you deduct 30, so then that puts him at 84 receptions. So you chop off 6 receptions from mine. So it drops 6 receptions. You drop about 100 yards, and now he's down to
around 24, where I have him.
Yeah, that's the difference. So it's going to come down to if you're losing 15 to 20 targets or 30 targets. So again, this is similar to the conversation we had before with DeAndre Hopkins. It's going to come down to what the production looks like on targets.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that people are going to, this is why rankings debates are fun, because what I think is not going to be what you think, and what everyone watching or listening out there is going to have their own opinion on. And you should draft that way. It's just all about hearing this information and then picking your lane and picking a spot. It's like the fence sitting thing earlier. Like, we can talk about range of outcomes all we want, but when we're drafting, we have to fucking pick someone.
Right. I mean, let's go back to Cooper Kupp. I mean, if he goes back to 2 years ago, or actually the first half of last season, and all of a sudden he's out there 95% of the time, every single week, we know Jared Goff loves him in the red zone and the end zone. We're going to be wildly wrong on that, because I am at 20 and you have him right there too. He'll be back inside the top 10.
Yeah, he was number 4 in PPR scoring last year. Like, he was excellent.
even with that decrease at the end of the year.
So it's just a commitment to me on Robert
He scored
Woods.
a touchdown in like 3 straight games.
Well, it's tough though, because if I like Robert Woods, I feel like inherently in the rankings that has to hurt Cooper Kupp. Like if I was super high on
Not
Cooper
always.
Kupp,
I mean,
not always, but I think I think
way.
in this offense it actually does, because I don't think this is going to be.
No,
I don't
this
think
is
Jared
not-
Goff is throwing for 5,000 yards.
No, but he doesn't have to, and that's why I was going to say that doesn't necessarily does. It could just hurt Tyler Higbee and the tight ends, because I was going to let's bring up the at the time, Oakland Raiders, Derek Carr offense, making Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree both top 10 wide receivers.
Sure, but both those
offense,
guys were pushing almost 30% target share. Even last year,
That's
Cooper
what I'm
Kupp was
saying.
down around 20%.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If that's how the offense skewed this year, and those are his 2 guys, and forget about the tight ends, it could happen. I'm not saying it's going to. I'm just saying there's a scenario where it does.
How big of a loser am I for ranking AJ Green at 27? I just want to believe. I'm like Mulder in the X-Files. I just want to believe.
Well, then I guess
Jake.
I'm slightly more of a loser than you are, because I'm at 26.
Okay, so you think that he's going to be good? I agree.
And that's just AJ Green 90% good. Like if it was 100% AJ Green still what he was a top 10 talent in the NFL. If he's at 90% of what he used to be and what we expect to be one of the worst defenses and one of the most happily passing teams that should be, if we're playing that whole game script narrative and we're looking at their schedule and looking at, yes, they face a lot of tough opponents, but they face a lot of good offenses, like the Steelers twice and the Browns twice and the Ravens twice, that they're going to have to pass, and Joe Burrow could come in and be Baker Mayfield and then some. I talk about Baker Mayfield's rookie season. And if that's the case, AJ Green could easily top where we both have him.
For sure. What are the chances Tyler Boyd outscores him, though?
I'd say it's more than a non-zero. I would actually, you know what? I'd put it at 50-50.
Yeah, I was going to say way better than a non-zero chance. I was going to say like 45%.
Well, because you remember the narrative last year, Tyler Boyd sucks without AJ Green. Well, he kind of threw that one out the window because he was fine without AJ Green. So what if he actually still is better with AJ Green, and then he's better than what he was last year, and he's the number 1 for the team?
Oh, yeah. It's definitely within the range of outcomes. And like they're going right around each other, aren't they? In terms of like where they're being drafted.
I think they're usually going pretty close.
Yeah. So you pick your poison. You probably don't want both, unless you're gold this year. I know that like stacking has been a big thing even for season-long fantasy this year, just because there's so many unknowns that if you end up with the healthy team and that team is good, you could build a stack of Green and Boyd and Joe Burrow and just go YOLO on that.
Well, who's their tight end now? No CJ Uzma?
Yeah, probably pass on that one.
I'm trying to look right now. So AJ Green last night in a draft that actually Davis was in. He went in the 6th round. He was 602. No, this is backwards. So 6'11. Backwards is that I wasn't counting it right myself. Tyler Boyd was 701. So they are 2 picks apart. So there you go.
What do you do with Ridley?
I think Ridley's being way overdrafted, similar to the Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf situation, where I like Ridley. And to go back to that study, he's one of the most efficient and highest end zone targets to touchdown conversion out there. And I don't think that's going to change. Like, I'm not saying that, and I wrote that up in the article. I'm like, he's one of the ones that I don't think is going to fall back to the norm. Like, for real quick reference, an end zone target, 38.3% of the time, that's the league average. It converts to a touchdown. He's been around 60 to 70% both these past 2 years. So I don't think he's going to drop back. But at that rate, that's already how good he's been. Like, I don't see that getting better, because is he going to start catching 100% of his end zone targets? And until he surpasses Julio in targets and becomes the number 1, I just don't see how people are putting him inside the top 15 and want to take it there. Julio is the number 1, and Julio is going to dominate like he always does. So I think this is where Calvin Ridley should be. We're on the same page with Calvin Ridley, despite being different on DK Metcalf.
All right, 31-40. Got my main man, Will Fuller. I think there's a year to draft Will Fuller, Jake. It's this year, with so many unknowns about who is going to play and who is not going to play and the different variables. Like, hey, then, if you get 6 games out of everyone, Will Fuller's 6 games aren't bad.
Depends on which 6 games you're going to get. That's another rose-colored glasses. Go look at some of the games where he didn't do anything while healthy, while 100% healthy. People just remember those little stretches because he puts them up in bunches.
I feel like Will Fuller has hurt you in some way.
No, he's just the new Amari Cooper. Over 16 games, He could be Amari Cooper. That's who he is, though. And that's why I hate it. It's the same reason I hate Jared Cook. So you're like, yeah, go play him in basketball. There's your perfect basketball player. Seasonal. I'm not going to play that roller coaster because you have to put him out there every single week. I will say the one positive thing. Amari Cooper or Will Fuller at his cost, I will invest this year because his cost is relative to the risk. But when it comes to this offense, the one I've been getting the most of is Randall Cobb at the end of drafts because I could see where Randall Cobb leads this team in receptions and yards.
So the rest of the list, I got Jarvis at 32, Sterling Shepard, Hollywood Brown.
Let him see that.
Tony, what's that?
Don't let Jarvis Landry see that. He'll get mad.
Oh, watch out.
Don't disrespect Jarvis.
He's wide receiver 3. It's pretty good. Tony Miller, Doug Judy, Brendan Cooks, Mike Williams, Michael Gallup, and Jamison Crowder at number 40. I'm not really big on Perriman. I much prefer Crowder in this spot just because the Jets are going to stink. And Sam Darnold's not very good. So just, the guy with the easy completions. That's the guy who's going to get all the looks.
100%. Jamison Crowder is just Terry McLaurin with an injury history. That's I don't understand why people aren't more on Jamison Crowder. I mean, again, maybe I do understand maybe because it's the injury history, but Jamison Crowder over 16 games should replicate a lot of what Terry McLaurin does for what you just said. Very similar reasons. I'm trying to did you say any Giants receivers?
Yeah, I had Sterling Shepard at number 33.
I was curious to see if you said Slayton or Shepard. I'm with you on Shepard. I have Shepard at 36. Shepard, when healthy, even when everybody's healthy, he's still been the number one, and everybody wants to take Slayton this year. And I don't hate Slayton. I have Slayton. Where do I have him? I'm looking for him.
I got Slayton. I got Slayton at 44.
I have 43. So we're basically lockstep on the Giants receivers.
Yeah, so I just look at Shepard, and like you said, when everyone is healthy, Shepard's the guy. 23% market share. It's like when Ingram is out there, Ingram gets the ball. A lot of Slayton's numbers were put up with significant injury, and I get why you would want to draft him, go reach for him. And if he's one of your guys, go reach for him. I got no problem with that. He's just not one of my guys that I think with everyone healthy, we're not even factoring in Golden Tate into the situation. I think there's a chance that Golden Tate outscores Darius Slayton. You're going to get some big games out of him, but I think they're going to be few and far between this time around.
Yeah, I think so. My biggest concern, and you brought up Golden Tate, is how much he's on the field. I think despite what he brought when he was with the Lions and, being able to pass block and stuff like that, on routes that other people are running. I just don't know if he's the third option when it comes to snap counts. And that's my biggest. Now, what if he's the second one and Slayton's the third? Despite what Slayton did last year. I mean, this is one of those ones similar to the Rams where we could find out by week 3 that, the Giants team just has a completely different outlook on what the snap count will be than what we expect.
Anyone else in that little range there, like your guy, Anthony Miller, number 35?
I'm at 37. I love Anthony Miller this year. He's somebody too. I have to go back. I'll give you another little pull from that article. I'm going to pull up the number real quick because I was just writing about Anthony Miller. Anthony Miller, 1 of 6 in end zone targets. I think Nick Foles can do a better job than Mitch Trubisky.
Maybe. I watched a Celebrity Family Feud recently where Mitch Trubisky was the captain of the team. Not a whole lot of inspiration from Mitch Trubisky on Family Feud.
I forget which was that the one. Was that the one with Aaron Jones on the team?
I don't think Aaron Jones was on that team. Cam Robinson was on the team. Jamal Adams was on his team.
I saw a different one. I saw a different one that Aaron Jones was on there, and Damian Williams was there, and it was I forget who else.
Mitch Trubisky might be the worst Family Feud player of all time. If my grandfather was on Family Feud, he would be terrible, but maybe not as bad as Mitch Trubisky.
I gotta go back. I missed that one. Yeah, I just remembered. Cortland Sutton was the team leader on the one that I saw.
Yeah, the one I watched, on the veteran side, had Diggs. Gerald McCoy was the team captain.
Oh no, this was versus Hall of Famers, and all Michael Irvin did the entire time was talk about how great the Hall of Fame was and how they're all amazing and all the rookies suck.
Well, yeah, he talked about how great he is, how great the Hall of Fame is, the Cowboys, and just yelled Tebow over and over.
He did yell a lot.
Yeah, Michael Irvin's great. 41 to 50. Let's go. I still have Debo at 41. I just think he's a nice stash. You can get him way late.
I'm 49.
Way late if you want to. Now, everyone's drafting Ayuk. I'm not in on Ayuk. I just think it's more for Kittle in that circumstance. But I got Debo, N'Keal Harry, Christian Kirk, Slayton, Preston Williams, Michael Pittman, Deontay Johnson, Cole Beasley, Cole's Hole, and then Randall Cobb, your guy, and Emmanuel Sanders at number 50. And then it gets into Ruggs and Edelman, Jefferson, Jalen Reagor, Alan Lazard, Brashad Perriman, 90s teen heartthrob Hunter Renfroe, Mecole Hardman. Like, I'm just not huge on these guys.
And I could see why. So for Debo, real quick, I took him 9th round last night. Worth the risk, in my opinion, even if he misses all of September. I have him 49, a little bit of difference there. The biggest difference we have is Henry Ruggs. And I'm going to continue to say the same thing about Henry Ruggs. And, maybe he's the guy that I die on the hill with this year. But I think people don't realize how good of a complete receiver. Now, he's not 100% complete. He's not amazing and has no flaws. But he's more complete than people want to give him credit for. And I'm tired of people just saying, oh, he's only a downfield threat. He's not only a downfield threat. And the reason people are using the only a downfield threat is because they talk about Derek Carr and his deep ball. Derek Carr also not miserable with a deep ball. He's middle of the pack. And that's not saying like, oh my God, he's going to be amazing. But I go back to what we said earlier in the show. He made Michael Crabtree and Amari Cooper both wide receiver ones in the same year. Darren Waller, you could argue, is going to be the other wide receiver one. It can be Henry Ruggs. It's not going to be Renfroe. It's not going to be Tyrell Williams. Henry Ruggs, if everything comes in as a rookie, despite being a rookie learning curve, he should be the number one wide receiver from day one for the Raiders. And I have him inside my top. I just told you 42.
So the latest on Debo, if people don't know, John Lynch came out and said that he's not going to put a timeline on Debo's return at all from the broken foot, but he said he's probably going to miss at least a few games to begin the season. But that's how I would want to be drafting him. Like, I want him to be healthy when he comes back, even if he misses the first 4 games. I don't know how the fuck the season's going to go. Like, if I can draft him, what round did you say you took him in? 9th. I think that in most normal leagues, he's going later than that, especially with this new news coming out that he's like definitely going to miss some games at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, well, this is yesterday before the definitely misses. And again, but we go back to something you and I talked about, and you were the one that started it, and I agreed with you that year, was the Le'Veon Bell missing the first 4 games with suspension. Is those first 4 weeks, and granted, this is a best ball league that I took him in, but that was why I jumped around earlier, because I figured people would be willing to risk a little bit more in best ball because of that. It's even easier to make up for that loss. But even in your typical redraft, it's easier to make up that loss at the beginning of the season. And blank replacement wide receiver or running back, if it goes back to Le'Veon Bell, plus the 12 games of that player, is going to equal a hell of a lot more where you're taking them.
And where you're drafting him right now, like, to go back to that argument, I think it works better with running backs, because we're always talking about guys at the top of the board. If they miss time, like, how do you properly value them? You're not even drafting Debo as a starter right now.
No. He was my 5th wide
so
receiver.
So there's like no
draft.
risk whatsoever. Like, if he's out for the year, then like, oh man, my 11th round pick didn't come through. Like, big fucking deal.
Yeah. Like I said, he was my 5th wide receiver on that team.
Anyone else in this range you think that like we're way off on? I know that there's a lot of buzz for Deontay Johnson, but like it could be James Washington. It could.
It definitely 100% could. I wrote him up in last year's trash pile or dumpster diving. Is just fact that James Washington, it's not it's not set in stone that Deontay Johnson's the number 2. James Washington showed flashes, and James Washington showed a little bit more at times, and Ben Roethlisberger being back will help. But again, I would say odds today, Deontay Johnson is the number 2. But again, that's not done and said for. The James Washington is still somebody who, talk about a great deep ball player. He's definitely there. I mean, you could be talking about the Mike Wallace for this team and being James Washington.
Now that like half the Patriots have like said they're not playing this season, I have N'Keal Harry at 42. I have Julian Edelman at number 52. Harry over Edelman with Cam, right? Just for the like potential upside purposes?
No, I'm
Really?
actually, I have Edelman, and I have Harry over Sanu, but I think Sanu has a chance to outscore Harry. And I'm a Harry fan from last year. I'm a Harry fan. I think that people should be right back on board with him, but Cam's style of play. We talked about this with Josh Allen. We talked about this towards the end of Cam Newton's career before he got hurt with the Panthers. We saw what they tried to do with Devin Funchess and Kelvin Benjamin, because they're like, oh, he's inaccurate. Let's give him big 6'5" guys. Well, it didn't matter. It didn't help because you're still 50-50 ball. Cam Newton's improvement and accuracy improvement came when they started getting like DJ Moore guys, and he was better with Steve Smith when people remember Steve Smith is there. N'Keal Harry, still as good as he is, still struggles with separation. I would take Harry over Sanu, to be clear, but in a deep league, you probably have to go at least 18 rounds because he's not even being drafted right now. I think there's a chance where Sanu and Edelman are the 1 and 2 this year.
That's potentially the case. The one thing I like about Harry is that, well, he doesn't create a ton of separation. He gets the ball. Like, you throw him a jump ball, he's the strong hands on that young man. Just boom, right through the defender to go grab the ball. So I think that I get the Kelvin Benjamin, Devin Funchess type of comparison. I think that Harry's just a better receiver than those guys.
Absolutely. There's no question about no. Again, I think Harry.
Why do you hate
worthy.
N'Keal Harry?
I'm one of the biggest fans of N'Keal Harry from last year.
Yeah, sounds like it.
No, but the one flaw he had was separating, and that's all I'm saying. When it comes to Cam Newton, like, you put Tom Brady back here, and Tom Brady had those frustrations with N'Keal Harry because he wasn't breaking free. You put him on a different team, you put him in a different quarterback, you put him in a different scenario. Hell, you put him with Phillip Rivers. I like N'Keal Harry with Phillip Rivers than I do with Cam Newton. All I'm saying for Cam Newton and his style of what my concerns are, like, I would hate N'Keal Harry with Josh Allen. Is just, that's my concern. And I'm not saying, again, I have Harry at, where'd you have him? I have him 50.
I have him at number 42.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's negligible at that part of the draft. So again, it's just, I'm bringing up the point that don't forget about Sanu.
Any late round flyers? I know you mentioned Randall Cobb, but I actually have him in my rankings at number 49. Just to go down the list, just potential plays. I know there's some buzz about like Russell Gage, although now we're getting into a situation where there's just too many guys on Atlanta who have to be good.
The entire offense. Look, I'll throw out a couple, like, who do we already cover? We covered so many of these guys already. I'll throw out, look, Corey Davis could be following the Devontae Parker career path. I'm not dead on him yet, despite that, how run heavy that offense is, but just, he's free now. Like, just last year, he was being drafted so high, and now he's free. I'll go take a free flyer on Corey Davis. Miles Boykin is another one that I think could be the touchdown maker for the Ravens that you're getting super late. And I think there was one. Oh, we already mentioned him. Steve Sims. Now Kelvin Harmon is out, Steve Sims is the number 2. Like, there's very little competition is Gandy Golden, who's a rookie.
Who
also struggles to separate right now.
I would throw out Paris Campbell. I think that there's an opportunity for him to establish himself as the number 2, at least in terms of volume. Other than that, like Josh Reynolds. Yeah, Josh Reynolds
Look at that.
Could be somewhat interesting.
You know what? I'll throw out one more.
I thought Greg Ward was good last year. I know he's not going to get the run that he did for the Eagles, but I don't know. He was like the only reliable guy that they had.
But, Rager could be their number 1 from day one, depending on what Jeffrey is going to play possibly at some point. But Deshaun Jackson's still on the team as a day one. He's healthy for right now. Greg Ward is any of those receivers are basically going to be the number 3 option anyway, behind the top 2 tight ends. I will say this, and I was about to say, I hate bringing up his name. We just talked about him, actually. I just said his name a few minutes ago. If Alan Lazard doesn't get the number 2 job, and it is Devin Funchess, I hate Devin Funchess. Like, let's be clear. I don't want Devin Funchess. But if you told me he has the number 2, here's what I need to hear. And I said this I did a show with Chris Harris, and he was like, what do we have to hear about certain players when the season starts? If we get reports that Devin Funchess is clearly, definitively the number 2 wide receiver and going to be on the field 80% of the time, I'm going to have shares of Devin Funchess.
Well, good luck with that.
I wish I could see your face.
Good luck with that. Jake Ciely, at AllInKid on the Twitter box, at theathletic.com to find his rankings and his articles. Tell us what else you got's going on.
Draft kit launch part 2 coming out next week after the flex drafts this weekend, which you're a part of. Just to relaunch, update the rankings, update all the articles now that it's drafting season, which we're kicking off the flex league. So yeah, good times.
Although we are drafting the flex league this weekend, I would recommend everyone wait as long as possible to do the drafts this year. Like, more so, I always recommend that in normal years. This year, much better idea to wait.
I would, if possible, I would absolutely wait till the very last weekend if possible.
All right. I'm Pat Mayo. You can follow me at the PME, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Sometimes I do giveaways on Twitter, so you might want to check that out at the PME. Smash the like button for the episode. Leave your favorite sleeper in the comment section and rate the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast 5 stars. Thank you very much for that. The entire draft kit from me is in the description of this video and podcast. If you want to go check anything out, the lists are in there, and they're up on dknation.draftkings.com. I'm Pat Mayo. Thank y'all for watching. I'll see you next time.
Mayo Experience! Experience!